Welcome back, American coin hunter. Imagine holding a single small copper-colored coin between your fingers, something so common that most people would not even bother to pick it up from the ground. Yet hidden inside this ordinary object is a story so massive, so layered, and so explosive that it has shaken collectors, dealers, and investors across the entire United States and beyond, because the 2000 D Lincoln 1 cent is not just a penny. It is a time capsule, a mistake frozen in metal, a product of history colliding with human error, industrial speed, and economic transition. And when people talk about impossible coin values, whispered rumors of museum insurance figures, private transactions, combined error markets, and headline-grabbing numbers like $178 million, this coin's name is always pulled into the conversation, not because every example is worth that amount, but because the story surrounding this coin has grown larger than the coin itself, becoming a symbol of how something tiny can turn into something monumental. The year 2000 was not just another year for the United States Mint. It was the turning of a millennium, a psychological moment where technology, fear, optimism, and production pressure collided, and the Denver Mint, identified by the small but powerful D Mint mark beneath the date, was operating at extreme capacity, striking billions of Lincoln cents at incredible speed. And when machines run that fast, when humans are rushing to meet demand, when metal is fed nonstop into presses that barely cool down, mistakes are not just possible, they are inevitable. And those mistakes are exactly where the magic begins. The 2000 D penny officially weighs approximately 2.5 grams, composed primarily of zinc with a thin copper plating, a dramatic shift from the solid copper cents of earlier decades. And this change alone plays a massive role in why errors on these coins can be so dramatic, because zinc behaves differently. Under pressure, it flows, cracks, bubbles, and splits in ways copper never did. And when that thin copper layer fails to bond correctly, entire worlds of visual anomalies are born, from bubbling surfaces to peeling skins, from missing plating to exposed gray cores that instantly catch the trained eye of a collector who knows exactly what they are looking at. On the obverse of the coin sits Abraham Lincoln, calm, dignified, and timeless, a design originally created by Victor David Brenner in 1909, making it one of the longest-running portrait designs in American coinage history. And by the year 2000, this portrait had been struck so many times that the dies themselves were wearing down at alarming rates. And worn dies lead to weak strikes, doubled features, distorted lettering, and ghostly impressions that appear to float on the surface like shadows of an alternate reality. And collectors live for these moments, because a doubled ear, a stretched date, or a ghost image of Lincoln's profile can instantly turn pocket change into a four-figure, five-figure, or even higher-profile auction piece. The reverse of the 2000 D cent still carried the Lincoln Memorial design, a symbol not just of architecture, but of national identity, with the tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the columns. And it is exactly in these fine details that some of the most valuable errors are found, where columns vanish, steps blur together, letters fade or split, and entire sections appear misaligned, rotated, or partially missing. And when a coin is struck off-center, when the planchet is misfed, or when the die shifts mid-strike, the result is a piece that looks like it escaped from another dimension. And these are the coins that cause heart-stopping moments at flea markets, estate sales, and old coffee cans that have not been opened in decades. One of the most famous error types associated with the 2000 D penny is the off-metal strike, where a cent is accidentally struck on a planchet, intended for another denomination, such as a dime or foreign coin. And while rare, these errors are documented, photographed, and fiercely contested in the collector world, because when authenticated, they represent a breakdown in mint protocol so severe that it borders on the unbelievable. And these pieces do not just sell, they ignite bidding wars, they end friendships between dealers, and they disappear into private collections where the final price is never publicly disclosed, feeding rumors, speculation, and the legendary figures that circulate online and in whispered conversations at coin shows. Then there are double die varieties, a phrase that sends a thrill through anyone who understands it, because a true double die is not damage, it is not wear, it is not a scratch, it is a die itself that was improperly manufactured, creating a doubled image that repeats with absolute consistency across multiple coins. and the 2000 D series is known for several dramatic double die, obverse and reverse examples, where the date, the word liberty, or the motto "I in God we trust" shows clear separation, notching, and thickness that can be seen even without magnification. And when these varieties surface in high grade, especially uncirculated or red condition, their value multiplies exponentially. Clipped planchets tell another story entirely, one of metal sheets improperly cut before striking, resulting in curved or straight missing sections along the edge of the coin. And while some people mistake these for damage, a real clip has telltale signs such as the Blakesley effect, where the opposite rim is weak due to metal flow, and genuine clipped 2000 D cents have sold for sums that shock people who think pennies are worthless. And every confirmed example adds another layer to the growing legend of this year and mint combination. Die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors appear like lightning frozen in copper, jagged lines running across Lincoln's face or erupting from the rim like molten metal. And these are not defects in the coin. They are the last gasps of a dying die that was pushed beyond its safe lifespan. And the year 2000 was notorious for this because demand was relentless, and Denver mint dies were used until failure, creating dramatic retained cuts, rim-to-rim cracks, and massive blobs of metal that look almost sculptural, turning a mass-produced cent into a unique artifact. When people hear figures like $178 million associated with a coin like the 2000 D cent, it is important to understand how such numbers are born, because no single normal penny carries that price tag. But markets are not just about individual items. They are about aggregates, about cumulative value, about private error collections, about museum-grade pieces insured for astronomical amounts, about hoards, about lifetime collections assembled quietly and sold discreetly. And when experts talk about the total market impact, investment, movement, and insured valuation of elite error varieties tied to this single year and mint, the numbers become staggering, crossing into territory that sounds unreal but reflects decades of transactions, speculation, and capital flow within the numismatic world. Collectors chase the 2000 D penny not just because of what it is, but because of what it represents. The moment America stepped into a new millennium, the last full year before major design changes, the era when zinc cents ruled circulation, and the point at which error collecting exploded due to online marketplaces, digital photography, and global communication, allowing a farmer in Kansas or a student in Pakistan to identify a rare mint error and instantly connect with buyers across the world. Every scratch, every flaw, every unusual texture on a 2000 D cent is now examined under microscopes, debated on forums, graded by third-party services, and locked in plastic slabs that preserve not just metal, but stories. And when a pristine error example earns a high mint state grade with full red luster, the price does not simply rise, it leaps, because condition is everything, and perfection combined with imperfection is the ultimate paradox collectors are willing to pay for. What makes this coin even more fascinating is that millions of them are still out there, still hiding in rolls, jars, and forgotten drawers, still passing from hand to hand unnoticed. And that is what fuels the obsession, the idea that history is not locked behind museum glass, but circulating quietly among us, waiting for the right eyes to recognize it, the right light to reveal it, and the right moment to transform it from 1 cent into something that changes a life. As this penny continued to circulate through American hands at the dawn of the 21st century, something subtle but powerful was happening beneath the surface of everyday life. Because while people were focused on computers, internet growth, and fears of technological collapse, the United States Mint was quietly producing history at an industrial scale, and the 2000 D Lincoln cent became a silent witness to that moment, absorbing every vibration of the presses, every microscopic shift in metal flow, every human decision made on a crowded mint floor where speed mattered more than perfection. And it is precisely this environment that transforms an otherwise ordinary coin into a breeding ground for rare and astonishing errors that today command obsessive attention. Collectors who specialize in the 2000 D cent often describe the first moment they notice something wrong with one as almost cinematic, a strange shine, a missing detail, a warped rim, or a texture that simply did not belong. And once that spark is lit, the hunt becomes relentless, Because the more examples you study, the more you realize how wide the spectrum of variation truly is, from minor anomalies barely visible without magnification to dramatic structural failures that look more like abstract art than legal tinder. And this diversity is why entire books, databases, and long-running research threads are dedicated solely to pennies from this single year and mint. Weight anomalies are another crucial factor that turns a simple cent into a certified error, because while the standard weight is about 2.5 grams, deviations can signal missing plating, improper alloy mixes, incomplete planchets, or even foreign metal contamination, and a coin that weighs significantly less or more than expected becomes a prime candidate for authentication. And once confirmed, these pieces often leap from obscurity straight into high-end collections, because weight does not lie, and metal does not forget how it was made. The symbolism embedded in the coin itself also adds layers of meaning that collectors and historians cannot ignore, because Abraham Lincoln represents unity, endurance, and moral resolve, and placing his image on a coin struck during the transition into a new millennium creates a poetic parallel between past and future, stability and change. And when that image is distorted by an error, doubled, cracked, or partially missing, it creates a powerful visual metaphor that resonates far beyond. Numismatics, turning metal into narrative. Some of the most talked about 2000D errors involve rotated dies, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned, sometimes by subtle degrees and sometimes by dramatic angles approaching a full rotation. And when such a coin is flipped, the misorientation is instantly obvious, creating a tactile and visual shock that even non-collectors can appreciate. And these pieces often become teaching tools, passed around at shows and seminars as examples of how even tightly controlled systems can fail in spectacular fashion. Then there are broad strikes, coins struck without a proper retaining collar, allowing the metal to expand outward uncontrollably, resulting in a flattened, oversized cent with a smooth or distorted edge. And these errors are especially striking on zinc-based cents because the metal spreads in unpredictable ways, sometimes thinning so much that light passes through the rim. And when a broad-struck 2000D cent retains sharp internal detail despite its warped shape, it becomes a prize that defies expectations and challenges assumptions about minting tolerances. The market behavior surrounding these coins is as fascinating as the errors themselves, because values do not rise in straight lines. They surge, collapse, and surge again, driven by auction results, social media exposure, certification discoveries, and even viral videos that suddenly shine a spotlight on a previously overlooked variety. And when a single, authenticated error sells for an eye-watering amount, it sends shockwaves through the community, prompting roll searches, estate evaluations, and a renewed frenzy that pushes demand to new heights. This is where the idea of massive market figures like $178 million takes shape, not as a single transaction, but as a constellation of values, collections, insurance appraisals, museum holdings, private portfolios, and long-term investments all orbiting around a single year and mint mark. And when analysts add up decades of sales, projected growth, and the sheer number of high-value specimens known and unknown, the cumulative impact becomes almost impossible to ignore. Authentication plays a critical role in this ecosystem, because without expert verification, an error is just a curiosity. But once a coin is encapsulated by a respected grading service, labeled, numbered, and entered into population reports, it gains legitimacy, traceability, and market power. And the 2000D cent appears again and again in these records, its population numbers growing slowly, deliberately, as new discoveries are made and old collections are finally brought to light. What truly fuels the legend, however, is the unknown, the idea that for every spectacular error already certified, there may be dozens still hiding in circulation, misidentified, or dismissed as damage. And this uncertainty keeps collectors awake at night, turning ordinary coin rolls into potential treasure chests. And every time someone finds an unusual 2000D cent, posts a photo, and asks a simple question, the entire community leans in, hoping to witness the birth of another chapter in this ever-expanding story. The psychological pull of the penny cannot be overstated, because it represents accessibility, the idea that anyone, regardless of wealth or status, can participate in the hunt. And when that humble entry point intersects with stories of extraordinary value, it creates a powerful democratizing force that draws new collectors into the fold, ensuring that the legacy of the 2000 D. Lincoln cent will continue to grow, evolve, and surprise for generations to come. As collectors began to understand that the 2000 D. Lincoln cent was more than just another year in an endless stream of pennies, a deeper level of analysis emerged, one that focused not only on obvious errors, but on the subtle clues hidden in strike quality, surface texture, and microscopic alignment, because true value often lives in details so small that they escape casual observation, yet once seen, they cannot be unseen. And this is where experienced numismatists separate themselves from casual hunters. By learning to read metal the way a historian reads ancient manuscripts. One of the most intriguing aspects of the 2000 D cent is the way zinc interacts with copper plating under extreme pressure, because when the plating process is imperfect, the copper layer can thin unevenly, creating areas of translucence, discoloration, or complete exposure of the zinc core. And these exposed areas oxidize differently over time, forming patterns that are unique to each coin, effectively making every significant plating error a one-of-a-kind piece, impossible to replicate and impossible to truly replace. These plating errors can range from small blisters that look like raised bubbles on the surface, to dramatic peels where large sections of copper detach entirely, sometimes hanging on by a thread, sometimes missing altogether. And when such an error appears on a coin that otherwise shows strong strike detail and minimal wear, the contrast between perfection and failure becomes visually striking, elevating the coin from novelty to centerpiece, and driving collectors to compete aggressively when one appears on the market. Another layer of fascination comes from the study of die pairings, because every coin is struck by a specific obverse and reverse die combination. And when researchers map these pairings, patterns emerge, showing which dies produced the most errors, which were retired early, and which were pushed far beyond their intended lifespan. And the 2000 D penny has become a case study in this field, with certain die marriages now legendary for producing repeated anomalies, making coins from those dies especially desirable. Environmental factors also play a role in the survival and appearance of these cents, because zinc-based coins are notoriously sensitive to moisture and temperature, and a coin stored in a dry, controlled environment may retain its original luster for decades, while one exposed to humidity can corrode rapidly. And this means that high-grade 2000 D error cents are disproportionately rare, not because they were not made, but because time itself has been hostile to their preservation. As stories of high-value sales spread, a new generation of collectors entered the scene, armed with digital scales, magnifying lenses, and access to online archives, transforming what was once a niche hobby into a data-driven pursuit. And the 2000 D cent became a gateway coin, a piece that taught beginners how to identify genuine errors, avoid damage misinterpretation, and appreciate the complex journey from mint to market. And this educational role further cemented its importance within the broader numismatic narrative. The coin's place in history is also tied to economic shifts, because by the year 2000, the cost of producing a penny was approaching, and in some years exceeding, its face value, sparking debates about the future of the denomination. And this context adds another layer of irony and intrigue to the idea that a coin, nearly deemed obsolete, could harbor such immense potential value, turning economic inefficiency into collectible gold. Some of the most dramatic 2000 D cents are those struck through foreign objects, where grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or other debris interfere with the strike, leaving ghostly impressions or missing elements that look intentional but are anything but. And these errors are particularly compelling because they capture a fleeting moment inside the mint, a split-second where something that did not belong found its way between die and planchet, leaving a permanent record of chaos in an otherwise controlled process. The collector market responds strongly to these stories because provenance, the documented history of a coin, can add as much value as the error itself. And when a 2000 D cent comes with a well-documented discovery narrative, photographs, and certification records, it becomes more than metal. It becomes a story artifact, something that carries the voice of its finder and the journey of its recognition. And these layered narratives are often what push prices beyond expected ranges. Speculation, of course, plays its role, and as rumors circulate about undiscovered varieties, experimental planchets, or suppressed mint records, the imagination of the community is ignited. And while not every rumor holds truth, the very act of searching keeps the market alive. And the 2000 descent remains at the center of this speculative energy, a focal point for both serious research and hopeful dreaming. Over time, as more data is collected and more coins are studied, the picture becomes clearer, yet never complete, because each new discovery reshapes the understanding of what is possible. And this dynamic, evolving knowledge base ensures that the 2000 D. Lincoln Cent is not a closed chapter, but an ongoing story, one that invites participation, rewards patience, and reminds everyone that history is not static. It is constantly being rediscovered, one coin at a time. And as long as pennies continue to be found, examined, and questioned, the legacy of the 2000 descent will endure, not as a relic of the past, but as a living example of how ordinary objects can become extraordinary through the combined forces of time, error, and human curiosity. As the years moved further away from the moment these coins were struck, something interesting happened in the minds of collectors and investors. Because distance in time often creates clarity, and clarity creates conviction. And with the 2000 D. Lincoln Cent, that conviction slowly hardened into the belief that this issue was not finished revealing its secrets, that it was still in the early chapters of a much longer story. And this belief alone began to shape behavior in the market, encouraging long-term holding rather than quick selling, which in turn reduced available supply and intensified demand for the best and most dramatic examples. One of the most compelling developments surrounding the 2000 descent was the recognition of progressive die states, where a single die can be studied as it deteriorates over time, producing a sequence of coins that show the gradual evolution of cracks, breaks, and distortions. And finding multiple coins from the same die at different stages is like discovering frames from a lost film, allowing researchers to reconstruct the life and death of a tool that struck millions of coins. And when such a progression is documented and certified, its collective value can exceed that of any single coin, because it tells a complete story rather than a single moment. Collectors began to notice that certain 2000 descents shared identical flaws in the same locations, confirming that these were not random accidents, but repeatable die characteristics. And this realization elevated some varieties from curiosities to cataloged issues, giving them names, reference numbers, and dedicated followings. And once a variety earns recognition, its market trajectory often changes overnight, because recognition creates legitimacy, and legitimacy attracts serious money. The role of third-party grading services became increasingly important in this phase, because as prices rose, so did the stakes, and authentication was no longer optional but essential. And when a 2000 D error cent was encapsulated with a clear description and a high numeric grade, it gained instant credibility, becoming eligible for major auctions, registry sets, and institutional collections. And each such appearance reinforced the coin's reputation as a legitimate asset rather than a novelty. At the same time, skepticism also grew, because with rising values came increased attempts at deception, and the community became more vigilant, learning to distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage, plating blisters from corrosion, doubled dies from machine doubling. And this collective sharpening of knowledge actually strengthened the market, because it filtered out noise and focused attention on truly exceptional pieces. And the 2000 descent survived this scrutiny, emerging with its status intact. International interest also played a surprising role, because American pennies circulate far beyond U.S. borders through travel, trade, and curiosity, and collectors around the world began to search their own accumulations, adding a global dimension to the hunt. And this widened search field increased the likelihood of new discoveries, while also expanding the buyer base, pushing prices higher through international competition. The emotional aspect of collecting cannot be ignored either, because many people associate the year 2000 with personal memories, milestones, and transitions. And owning a coin from that year carries sentimental weight, and when that coin also happens to be rare or valuable, the emotional and financial motivations reinforce each other, creating a powerful attachment that discourages selling and encourages preservation. Stories began to circulate of people finding valuable 2000 D cents in the most ordinary circumstances, in supermarket change, in old jars, in inherited collections that were never thought to contain anything special. And these stories, whether fully documented or not, fueled the imagination of the public because they suggested that fortune could still be hiding in plain sight, and that the barrier to entry was as low as paying attention. As more high-profile sales occurred, price guides started to adjust, cautiously at first, then more confidently, reflecting the reality that certain error varieties were consistently outperforming expectations, and while the majority of 2000 D cents remained worth face value. The gap between ordinary and extraordinary examples widened dramatically, reinforcing the idea that knowledge, not luck, was the key differentiator in this market. The discussion of massive figures like $178 million continued to evolve as well, increasingly framed not as hype, but as a cumulative reflection of the coin's footprint across collections, institutions, and markets. And while such numbers remain abstract to most individuals, they serve as a reminder of the scale at which numismatics operates when history, rarity, and demand align, and the 2000 D cent stands as a case study in how that alignment can occur even in the most unexpected places. Educational efforts grew alongside market interest, with seminars, articles, and videos dedicated to teaching people how to properly examine pennies, how to weigh them, how to identify genuine errors, and how to store them safely. And the 2000 D cent often served as the primary example in these lessons. Its variety and accessibility making it an ideal teaching tool, and this educational role further embedded it in the culture of modern coin collecting. As decades pass, the coins that survive in top condition become fewer, not because they were destroyed intentionally, but because circulation is unforgiving and zinc-based cents are especially vulnerable. And this natural attrition acts as a slow, relentless force that increases rarity over time, ensuring that high-grade 2000 D error cents will become increasingly difficult to obtain and therefore increasingly valuable. In this way, the story of the 2000 D Lincoln cent mirrors broader themes of history itself, where significance is not always apparent at the moment of creation, but emerges gradually through use, loss, discovery, and reinterpretation, and what began as a routine act of minting has transformed into a rich tapestry of narratives, values, and possibilities that continues to expand with every new find and every new analysis. And so the coin persists, not frozen in the year 2000, but moving forward with each passing year, accumulating meaning, attention, and value, reminding everyone who encounters it that history is not something locked away in the past, but something that continues to unfold in the present, sometimes in the palm of your hand, disguised as a simple penny. As awareness deepened and the collector community matured around the 2000 D Lincoln cent, another transformation quietly took place, one that shifted the conversation from simple discovery to strategic preservation, because people began to realize that finding an error was only the beginning of the journey, and that how a coin was handled, stored, documented, and presented could dramatically influence its long-term value, sometimes making the difference between a modest premium and a life-changing sum. Handling practices became almost ritualistic among serious collectors, because the thin copper plating on zinc cents is unforgiving, and a single fingerprint, a moment of friction, or improper cleaning can permanently alter the surface, destroying originality and reducing value instantly. And so gloves, soft holders, and climate-controlled storage became standard, not out of obsession, but out of respect for how fragile these coins truly are and how much potential they carry within their small diameter. Documentation emerged as another critical pillar, because as prices climbed, stories alone were no longer enough, and collectors began to photograph their finds from multiple angles, record weights down to hundredths of a gram, log measurements, and keep detailed notes about where and how each coin was discovered. And this paper trail, often overlooked by beginners, became a powerful tool when it came time to authenticate, insure, or sell, turning a simple coin into a well-supported asset. The rise of registry sets added yet another dimension to the 2000 D cents appeal, because competitive collectors sought to assemble the finest known examples of specific varieties, and once a particular error became recognized within a registry category, the race to own the top-graded specimen intensified, sometimes pushing prices far beyond what traditional price guides suggested. Because competition is emotional, and emotion often overrides logic in high-stakes collecting, market cycles also became more visible with time, revealing patterns that seasoned participants learned to anticipate, periods of rapid growth followed by consolidation, moments when attention shifted temporarily to other series, only to return stronger when a new discovery or record-breaking sale reignited interest. And throughout these cycles, the 2000 Descent demonstrated resilience, maintaining relevance even when the spotlight moved elsewhere. The role of storytelling in value creation cannot be overstated, because humans are wired to connect with narratives, and a 2000 Descent with a compelling backstory, a dramatic error, and a documented journey from obscurity to recognition resonates on a level that transcends metal and numbers, and such coins often become ambassadors for the hobby, featured in articles, videos, and exhibitions that introduce new audiences to the world of numismatics. Educational institutions and museums also began to take notice, not necessarily because of the face value of these coins, but because they serve as tangible examples of industrial processes, quality control, and the unintended consequences of mass production. And a 2000 error cent displayed behind glass tells a story about technology, economics, and human oversight that textbooks alone cannot convey. The debate over the future of the penny continued in the background, adding urgency to the preservation of modern cents. Because if production were ever to cease, coins like the 2000 would instantly become historical endpoints rather than ongoing issues. And this possibility encouraged collectors to think in generational terms, imagining how these coins would be viewed 50 or 100 years into the future, when the context of their creation would feel as distant as the early days of the Lincoln series feel today. More collectors adopted this long view. The idea of selling immediately after discovery became less attractive, replaced by strategies focused on holding, upgrading, and selectively releasing pieces when market conditions were favorable, and this shift reduced turnover, tightening supply and reinforcing upward pressure on prices for top-tier examples. The influence of digital platforms continued to reshape the landscape, because online auctions, forums, and social media allowed information to spread instantly, turning local finds into global events. And a single high-quality image of a rare 2000 error could spark conversations across continents within hours, amplifying interest and accelerating market response in ways that were unimaginable just a decade earlier. At the same time, misinformation also spread more easily, creating challenges for newcomers who struggled to separate genuine opportunity from exaggerated claims. And this made education even more valuable, because those who invested time in learning the nuances of the 2000 Descent were better equipped to navigate the noise, avoid costly mistakes, and identify truly exceptional pieces when they appeared. The sheer volume of coins struck in the year 2000 adds another layer of irony to the story, because abundance and rarity coexist within the same issue. Millions of identical coins on one end of the spectrum, and a tiny fraction of wildly different, highly prized anomalies on the other. And this contrast reinforces one of the central lessons of numismatics, that rarity is not always about how many were made, but about how many survived in a particular formed. As collectors continue to search, study, and share their findings, the collective understanding of the 2000 Lincoln cent grows richer and more nuanced, revealing patterns that were invisible at first glance. And each new insight adds depth to a story that shows no signs of reaching a conclusion. In this ongoing narrative, the 2000 Descent stands as a reminder that value is not fixed at the moment of creation, but evolves over time through attention, interpretation, and care, and that even the most humble objects can become extraordinary when viewed through the lens of curiosity and commitment. And so the journey continues, with every roll searched, every coin weighed, every surface examined under magnification, adding another thread to a tapestry that began at the turn of a millennium and continues to unfold, quietly, persistently, in the hands of those willing to look closely enough to see what others overlook. As the story of the 2000 D Lincoln cent moves toward its present moment, it becomes clear that this coin is no longer just a subject of study or speculation, but a living symbol of how value is created, transformed, and sustained over time. Because what truly sets this penny apart is not only the errors embedded in its metal, but the collective attention, belief, and dedication that generations of collectors have poured into understanding it, shaping its destiny far beyond what its creators ever imagined. Why now? Many of the most dramatic error examples have found permanent homes in private vaults, safety deposit boxes, and institutional collections, places where they are protected from light, moisture, and handling, essentially removed from circulation forever. And this quiet disappearance is one of the most powerful forces driving long-term value. Because every coin that leaves the open market increases the relative importance of those that remain, turning scarcity into momentum. The remaining undiscovered coins, however, are what keep the energy alive, because the possibility, however small, that another extraordinary 2000 cent is still waiting to be found creates a sense of unfinished business, a feeling that the story is not complete, and this feeling motivates collectors to keep searching long after logic might suggest the odds are slim. Because history has shown again and again that rarity often reveals itself slowly, unevenly, and without warning. Over time, the narrative around the 2000 cent has matured, shifting away from exaggerated promises toward a more grounded appreciation of what makes these coins special. And yet the fascination has not diminished, because even when hype fades, substance remains, and the substance here lies in documented errors, verified sales, and a growing body of research that continues to confirm the coin's significance within modern American numismatics. The discussion of immense market figures, including the often cited $178 million, has also evolved into something more nuanced, understood not as a single price tag, but as a reflection of accumulated value across decades of transactions, collections, insurance appraisals, and institutional holdings. And while such numbers may feel abstract, they underscore a fundamental truth: that even the smallest denomination can generate enormous economic gravity when rarity, demand, and narrative converge. What ultimately elevates the 2000 Lincoln cent beyond charts and catalogs is its human dimension, because behind every discovery is a person who noticed something unusual, who chose curiosity over indifference, who took the time to learn, verify, and preserve. And these individual decisions, multiplied thousands of times, are what transformed a mass-produced object into a cultural and financial phenomenon. The coin also serves as a quiet lesson in patience, reminding collectors that value often reveals itself gradually, not in dramatic flashes, but through steady accumulation of knowledge and perspective. And those who approach the 2000 cent with long-term vision rather than short-term excitement are often the ones who found themselves holding the most meaningful pieces, both financially and historically. As newer generations enter the hobby, drawn by stories, videos, and the enduring appeal of finding treasure in everyday life, the 2000 cent continues to act as a bridge between eras, connecting the analog past of pocket change and roll searching with the digital present of online research and global marketplaces, ensuring that its relevance does not fade but adapts. Looking forward, it is almost certain that future discoveries, reclassifications, and market shifts will continue to reshape how this coin is perceived, because numismatics is not static. It is a dialogue between the past and the present, constantly revised as new information comes to light, and the 2000 Lincoln cent remains firmly embedded in that dialogue, its voice steady, persistent, and impossible to ignore. In the end, what makes this penny extraordinary is not just what it is, but what it represents: the idea that history is not reserved for grand monuments or rare metals alone, but can exist in the most familiar forms, waiting quietly for someone to recognize its significance. And that recognition, once made, has the power to transform perception, value, and meaning all at once.